Welcome to episode 113 of Real Health Radio. You can find the links talked about as part of this episode at the show notes, which is www.7, so the word L spelled out, SEVEN, health.com/113.
Welcome to Real Health Radio. Health advice that's more than just about how you look. And here's your host, Chris Sandel.
Hey guys, thank you for joining me for another episode of Real Health Radio. Before I get going with this one, I have one bit of housekeeping I want to mention. So this podcast used to be a weekly show, and for the first 100 odd episodes, I kept to that bar a handful of weeks. But last year I had my son Ramsey, and so took some time off completely. And now, since I've returned, I've been doing a show on a fortnightly basis. For now, I'm going to be keeping to this, where I do a new episode every 2 weeks. But what I'm also going to be doing is rebroadcasting a previous episode during the gap weeks. So each week there will be an episode in your podcast app. And part of the reason for doing this is that I have so much older content that I know many listeners haven't consumed yet. Yes, there are dedicated fans that find my show and then systematically go back and listen to every episode, and I know that I've done that with a handful of podcasts. But typically what most people do is just start from whatever point they found the show at and then work forward. And by then rebroadcasting an episode, it instantly comes up in their podcast feed and then they listen to it. So I did this for the first time last week, releasing a previous episode all about the potential causes of women's reproductive issues. And it was an episode that I'd first released back in February of 2016, so just over 2 years ago. Since I released that episode, I've had a number of people email and say how much they liked my new episode podcast or my new podcast episode all about women's hormones. So obviously they hadn't listened to it first time round. So that felt like a sign that this was a good idea. So moving forward, that's what's going to be happening. One new episode every 2 weeks and one rebroadcast episode every other week. So on with today's show. So this is an episode where you're going to be hearing from two of my past clients. And this is the third time I've done an episode like this. The first two I will put links to in the show notes, so if you're interested, you can go and check them out. And the idea for this episode, it originally started as a request from a regular listener. They emailed me and said that they would love to hear me interview some of my clients to hear about their experiences. And when I did it, people liked it, so I've continued to do it, and here's the third time of me doing it. And the second reason I'm doing this show is because I've opened up my practice again to new clients. I take on clients twice a year, so once around the January, February time, and then once around the midpoint of the year. And I work with clients for a period of 5 months where we have a consult for an hour every 2 weeks. And years ago, I used to do one-off consults or a consult by consult basis, but I discovered it just doesn't work that well, especially with the types of stuff that I'm working on with people. So I now do it in a manner where it's 5 months, and that's how I work with people. And I have clients all over the world, and consults are done via Skype or FaceTime or phone. So even if you're not based in the UK where I am, this isn't a problem. I mean, more than half the people I work with are in Australia or Canada or Germany or the US or Spain or other places around the world and around Europe. So what I'd say is have a listen to the show today. And if working with me appeals to you, then we can start off by having a free initial chat. And this allows me to find out about your background, about what's going on, about what you're wanting to get out of the process of us working together. And it gives me a chance to explain how I work with people and to see for both of us if we're the right fit for one another. Because I only want to work with people that I truly believe that I can help. And having this initial chat just allows us to determine if we're going to be right for one another. So if you're interested in finding out more, you can head over to 7-health.com/help so HELP. For more details, you can have a read through of that page, and at the bottom of that page, there is a link to apply for the free initial chat. And I will get back to you within 48 hours and then arrange a time that suits both of us. So if you struggle with health or nutrition or body image or hormones or food issues or the multitude of things that I've done podcasts on over this time, like head to www.7-health.com/help and get in contact. So on today's show, as I said, I've got interviews with two of my past clients. Interestingly, both of them talk about starting their dieting careers at Weight Watchers. And if you are on my mailing list or you follow my blog, you'll have seen I wrote a piece last week about Weight Watchers and how they're going to be giving out free memberships to teenagers in the US over the summertime. And I talked about why I thought that this was a bad idea, and both my clients today are testament to why this is a bad idea. And both clients, I will say, are continuing to improve. In no way do I think that someone's health is going to be perfect at the end of our working together for 5 months. So both women are continuing to work on this stuff, but as you hear them talk about, they are in a very different place now compared to when we started together. And they are also regular people, and being on a podcast is not a regular occurrence for them. I think they both did a fantastic job at explaining their story, but there might be a couple of extra ums and ahs, and it's not as polished as some guests. But please forgive this, as it's not an easy thing to share information about your own food struggles on a podcast. I'd also add that for some reason, when I recorded both of these interviews, something was up with my microphone. I have a feeling it was recording from the internal Mac mic as opposed to my proper mic that I use for podcasts. So my end of the sound, it's like I'm using a tin can in a shed. But if you can ignore this and you can still hear me, it's just tinnier, you'll still benefit from the episode. So let's get going with the interviews. The first interview is with Jill, and I've actually been working with her for a year now. So we finished up the 5 months, and then we continue to work together. And here is her story. All right, Jill, thank you for joining me today.
I'm happy to be here.
Do you want to explain a little about your background and why you first got in contact with me?
Sure. I am about 35 years old. I'm married. I don't have any children. I have a great dog named Lily. And I initially got in touch with you because I had a pretty substantial history with dieting. But later on in life, it started. I grew up in like a household with a pretty normal relationship with food. Quote unquote. My mom, I think when I was around 8, started dieting after she was done having children, and I saw her go through that, but she never really like instilled or pressured me to like join her or gave me any dieting ideas or anything like that. But I did see what she went through, so I'm sure that affected me somehow. So I guess I was married for about 2 years. I am a registered nurse, so I was working in the hospital for a while, but just like a really crazy, chaotic schedule with 12-hour shift work, rotating day and night shifts. And it just really made me not feel well. I was eating, quote unquote, poorly, just not really taking the best care of myself, not being sure to get any exercise or movement in. And I just started to feel really sluggish and almost like depressed. So I noticed that, and my husband had noticed it too. So I figured, what can I do to kind of feel better? So of course I was like, well, I had probably gained like an extra, some odd pounds after eating like that. So I chose to join like this popular dieting club, Weight Watchers, when I was, going through that. And I joined it, and it was actually initially great because it taught me how to like cook for myself and eat balanced meals and I naturally lost some weight through that. I wasn't exercising or anything. And then once I saw how easy the weight was coming off, and of course, all of the positive reinforcement you get from, your loved ones and friends and, strangers or whatnot, it almost turned into like an obsession. And no matter how much weight I lost, it just wasn't enough. And I wanted to keep going. So like I had initially met my goal weight that I wanted to lose, which was, not a lot. It was just to kind of get me back into the weight that I was used to most of my life. And then that wasn't enough. So I just kept doing it. And I eventually, over a course of like, I think 2 or 3 years, I got down to a really low weight, something that is not healthy for somebody my height. And that's when like a lot of symptoms started. I wasn't feeling well. I was tired all the time. All I could think about was eating and exercising. My social life was like nothing, because anything that interrupted my eating or dieting habits caused me extreme anxiety. So I was very not socialized and almost like a hermit, very irritable all the time, cold, just not sleeping well, urinating all the time. My bowel movements were like nothing. I was bloated, a lot of water retention. So just, not feeling well at all. So eventually I had an episode where both of my legs had swollen up with like a lot of water. It was around the holidays and I had no idea what was happening to me. So I was convinced that maybe it was the birth control that I was on at the time causing it. So I went off of birth control and, the swelling in my legs had somewhat subsided, but none of the other symptoms had gone away. And, I waited for my period to come the next couple months and it never came. I went and saw my normal like woman doctor at the time. And she told me that, this is probably just, related to coming off to birth control and this is normal and it could last up to 6 months. And she told me that knowing how much weight I had lost, knowing my, pretty much most of my eating and exercise habits. So I was like, well, it's normal. So I'll just kind of wait for my period to come eventually.
Yeah.
And this is also all on top of starting to get negative feedback from people. People were starting to get concerned about me. My friends and family were saying things to me. My mom had even said to me, like, you're probably not getting your period because you've lost too much weight and you're exercising too much. And of course, I was just in denial. I'd get really angry with anybody who questioned me. So that was that. And then, I waited for my period to come. And when it never came, that's when I kind of started to get a little bit concerned. I had reached out, and also my husband, was begging me to get help from somebody because he was pretty concerned with my appearance and like my behavior. So I reached out to a nutritionist, a registered dietitian, and she happened to specialize in eating disorders. And I had no idea when I reached out to her initially that was her specialty. And when I went there, I kind of went over everything with her, and she said, you basically meet all the criteria for anorexia. So that freaked me out because that was like not even a thought in my mind, really. That's how just disordered my thinking was. And she had set me up to see like a regular doctor who specialized in teenagers with eating disorders. So they, could run like the right labs on me and all that stuff. And she also referred me to a therapist. So at that point in time, I just kind of started, treatment for, an eating disorder. And it was really hard. I mean, initially, obviously, they wanted me to gain weight and eat more. And that was really hard and scary. And I hated every minute of it. And, I did not have a good experience with eating more. I gained weight very fast, a lot of water weight, a lot of bloating, just very uncomfortable all around, and mentally and physically uncomfortable. So I had probably done that for about another 2 years. And I had gotten up to a weight where I was, I guess by the books, weight restored, because I was in a proper weight bracket for somebody my height. And a lot, I wasn't as entrenched how I used to be, but, a lot of the behaviors and thoughts were still present. And I just felt like I really wasn't getting anything else out of my team that I was working with at the time, because they were all baffled why I had not gotten my period back. And I guess I just didn't feel like they had much more to offer me. So I had actually researched myself why I wasn't getting my period back, and came across the term hypothalamic amenorrhea. And I started doing some research on that, and that, led me to go see a reproductive endocrinologist, which I just want to say, I think when I thought of a reproductive endocrinologist going to see her, I was like, oh, people with fertility issues only go here, because I was not trying to get pregnant, and I am not trying to get pregnant. So I was kind of hesitant to go see her, but I called the office and I asked, do you have women that, see you for other reasons other than pregnancies? And she said yes. So that's why I followed through with that appointment. And so when I went to her, she confirmed that I had hypothalamic amenorrhea, and basically told me, I think at that point in time, I looked pretty, quote unquote, normal. I didn't look underweight anymore. So she was also kind of baffled as to why I was not getting my period back. She said, maybe, you can cut back on your exercise a little bit more. And so I, did that, but she did tell me, she's like, some women just never get their period back. And she's like, and you may have to go on birth control in order to get the hormones to protect your bones, so that you don't get osteoporosis. So when she told me that, I was really disappointed and upset, and thought I had damaged my body permanently through dieting and exercise. But I was determined to kind of maybe look for other ways to get my period back without having to go on birth control, because something in my gut just told me that wasn't the right answer. So I, continued to see her for monitoring, because she was checking my labs and all that stuff. But I kept pushing off the idea of going back on birth control. And when I did that, that's when I started researching. I went in the little podcast app on my phone and typed in hypothalamic amenorrhea, and all of these different podcasts came up, and Chris, your podcast was one. Okay. And I listened to I think one of your podcasts that you covered on female hormones and just the monthly cycle and all that stuff. So that was your first episode I ever listened to. And then I just listened to literally all of them, and I loved everything that you had to say, because I'm a nurse and I really love all of the scientific explanations behind things, and nobody was giving that to me, throughout my course of treatment. And I needed that stuff, because I needed it in order to make sense of why I needed to eat more and move less, and in order to get my period back. So that is how I came across you.
Okay. I hadn't heard all of the details of that story in terms of that was how you discovered me. So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And did it feel like it was a big decision when you reached out to me, and there was any hesitancy in contacting me, or because you'd been going through this and seen so many people up until that point, it just felt like the next natural progression?
It was a little difficult, just because I was like, well, why is this going to be different? I've worked with, prior to you, I had worked with 2 dietitians and 2 therapists and multiple different doctors. And, they all kind of said the same thing, but they didn't really give me any background information on that theory. And a lot of, obviously some doctors said you're just never going to get your period back. So I was really nervous to reach out to you, because I didn't want to get your advice and then not follow it. And I also, my husband at the time, I didn't want to like upset him by not following another person's advice. So it was a little bit of hemming and hawing over it. But then I was just like, I need something different. I need, maybe just somebody else's perspective on things methods will make me, do things differently. So it was a little bit of hemming and hawing, but I did, once you said on your podcast that you were opening up your practice, I got on that opportunity.
Yeah. So then why don't you describe the process of us working together and what that looked like and how that was maybe different from in the past and just give people a bit of a sense of what that looked like from your perspective?
Well, obviously, like, I think initially you covered like the same stuff that my regular dietitian covered about, eating more, what kind of foods to eat, and, moving less. I think what was really different for me was like the activities and writing assignments that you gave me. Like, no other person that I had worked with prior to that made me think like that. And also you challenged like my thoughts on what it means to be thin and like what, like all of like the biases that go around that. So, and nobody had done that before. And I think that helped a lot.
And I mean, my recollection of that was it wasn't an easy process for you. I mean, is that a correct statement?
No, there was some, like for instance, like some of the eating, things that you had recommended, was very frustrating, because I knew, or thought I knew what I felt like eating some of those foods. And I just want to say like, bagels and pancakes and all of like, those things. I thought that those made me feel, all around just crappy. And I had tried to introduce foods like that before and I felt crappy. But this time, I did it and I didn't feel so crappy. And I, kept doing it. And so when I did that, my body I learned how to like enjoy those foods again. And also just the mindset around eating those type of foods changed a lot. So, initially, yes, very hard. Some of the writing assignments made me very angry. And I didn't feel like I was ready to do some of them. And you were really patient on a lot of that. Not patient enough where you were like, oh, just do it when you want, but just give me enough space to kind of process it. And then we kind of came back to it at a different point and when I was more ready. And I really appreciated that. So yes, not easy, but, very helpful.
Yeah. And I would say what you were having to overcome with this stuff isn't easy. And it does take time, but I think you are testament to the fact that people can overcome this stuff.
Yeah. And when you're overcoming it, it's like, I don't want to put the idea out there that my life is perfect and I don't ever have like a disordered eating thought or I don't ever feel bad about myself, because there are days that are harder than others. But my life now is like so much better than it was. And I am just super appreciative. I never ever thought that I would kind of be at a spot like this. But things come up that make you feel bad. And, I think what I learned is that this whole disordered eating and mindset, it's like a way of coping. So when I feel stressed, that's kind of what my initial way to deal with that stress is to kind of fall back on like these disordered thoughts and wrong ways of coping with things. So I, it does creep in every now and then, but it's definitely not how it used to be.
So why don't you then explain a little bit more about the different improvements that you've noticed with us working together? So like starting with improvements to your health, what's changed on that front?
Like health, like physicality wise, I feel a lot better. My energy is so much better. I don't feel like I want to sleep all the time. my actual sleep at night is a lot better as well. I get a solid like 7 to 9 hours. And I think I mentioned before that I used to wake up maybe like 3 or 4 times during the night just to use the bathroom. And that hasn't happened in a really long time. I'm able to make it through the night without using the bathroom, which is like great because it allows me to get a full night's sleep. And then my moods are so much better. They're more stable, and I feel like I can cope and actually think about things now. I was really irritable when I was dieting, and not feeling well. I probably was like the biggest bitch to be around, and I feel really bad for like my husband and my friends and my family because I was just on edge all the time, and like any little thing could like set me off, and like I just couldn't think. I couldn't process things, and I'd immediately become flustered. So now I genuinely, for the most part, feel happy and stable, and I feel like my old self again, which is really good. And in regards to like, I used to be cold all the time. I would have to like, anytime that I allowed myself to sit, I would be freezing, and I'd have to, be in like a sweatshirt and flannel pajama pants and wrapped up in a blanket, and then a space heater by me. And if I went to bed at night, I'd have like an electric blanket or a heating pad underneath me. My hands were freezing all the time. So that is pretty much gone. I'm warm. I'm able to sit in a room without being wrapped up. It is winter now, so it's a little different, but that has, being cold all the time has subsided. And also, when I was, at a very low weight, my body temperature was very low. My heart rate was really low. And all of those has improved and come up to, normal ranges. And I guess most importantly about my health, I got my period back. So it's not perfect. My cycles are still not completely quote unquote regular, but they are improving and getting better. And I think that was probably like the biggest reward out of all of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you say your cycles aren't regular at the moment, can you just give people a sense of that, of what you mean by that?
Yeah. So I think, like with my cycles, the first half of it is long. So the time before you actually ovulate is delayed. So it ranges. Some months, like last month, it was really almost normal, textbook normal. And now this one that I'm waiting on, it's a little bit delayed. And then, the one I had before this last one was like, or a few before that, I had to wait 70 days to get a period. So, it's just kind of been, back and forth a little bit, but it is coming. So that's what I'm appreciative for. I think a lot of girls, I feel like I'm the opposite, because a lot of girls recovering from hypothalamic amenorrhea, their second half of their cycle is usually shortened, which is the time from when you ovulate to when you get your period. And I don't experience that. I'm experiencing the first half, so I have to wait a very long time to ovulate. But I am ovulating, and that's really exciting too.
Yeah.
For somebody that wants normal cycle. So
definitely. And I would say your cycles are trending and getting better and better pretty much cycle on cycle now.
Yeah. And it's real, like when you're monitoring all this stuff, you really kind of get like probably a little bit more in tune with your body than you want to be, but it's really like neat, kind of learning about like your actual cycle. And I wish they kind of taught all of that stuff to us when we were like in sex ed and in high school.
Yes, it would definitely help.
Yeah.
And so what about then the body image part of it? So where would you say you are with this stuff now? And I know you said that you have good days and better days, or good days and worse days, etc. But just give it a sense of where that is now versus where you were.
It's again, I keep saying everything's better, but it is so much better. I never thought that I would be in my body and feel comfortable. And I don't want to say that it's like all lollipops and gumdrops all the time, because it's not. But I just feel more comfortable in my skin, which is crazy, because if you had told me, at the start of working together, Chris, like, okay, this is the body that you're going to be in and you'll end up being comfortable, I would have, said no freaking way. Like, I can't possibly imagine being like that and being happy. But I am, and I don't feel as uncomfortable in my skin, and I'm not constantly body checking myself or, looking in the mirror, over analyzing everything about me. So I don't know. I kind of think it's probably like a quote unquote normal girl's life. Sometimes you have good days where you feel really good about yourself, and then other days you're just kind of like, but I don't know. My husband says he has days like that too, and he never had any kind of eating disorder. So I guess it's pretty normal.
Yeah. And what about from a food perspective? What does that look like now after us working together versus where it was when we started?
Again, so much better. I don't constantly think about food anymore. I'm actually able to eat a meal and move on and go about my day. And I'm not constantly thinking about, okay, what's the next thing that I'm going to eat? And it's not like every meal is not a process. I mean, I can't tell you how much time and energy went into planning my meals in the past. And now it's just kind of like second nature. I think I'm still, working on the intuitive eating part, because I still, have a lot of thoughts, dieting thoughts in my head sometimes. But I kind of recognize them now, and I'm like, okay, ignore that and eat what you want. Don't worry about what, the dieting message out there is. And it's really nice, because I enjoy food now. And for instance, my husband and I just went on vacation, and we got back, and there was 2 nights where we had ice cream, because we were in Canada, and they had a big sign on the front door that said Canada's best ice cream. So
nice.
We ate the ice cream one night, and I was like, this is literally the best ice cream I've ever had. And my husband thought the same thing. So we went back the second night, and I would have never have done that in the past. And if I had, I would have either way overeaten it, because I would have been thinking to myself, eat it all now, because you're not going to get it, again for a really long time. And then I would have ended up feeling really bad, and then beating myself up the next day and restricting my food the next day or the next few days to make up the calories for that ice cream. And now it's just I ate, quote unquote normal amount of ice cream. I didn't feel overly full. I felt satisfied. And then the next day, it was just kind of the next day. I woke up and I had breakfast, and there wasn't a thought. And we were able to go out to dinner, and I wasn't freaking out over the menu or what oils they were cooking with, or, worrying about, what they're doing to the food in the back. It's just really nice to not be so stressed out and actually be able to enjoy something. And another thing that I just recently enjoyed, it was Christmas. I was with my family, and usually the tradition is the days following up to Christmas, we kind of bake all of these cookies. And I hadn't, done that in years. And this year I was the one leading the pack. I was we have to bake the cookies. And we baked the cookies. We baked 6 different kinds. I had a blast with my family. And I had a cookie or 2 after Christmas dinner or Christmas Eve. And then honestly, after baking all of them and eating that, for a few days, I was just kind of I'm done with the cookies. And it was so nice to just kind of feel I could have them when I wanted them and not stress about it. And so yeah, the eating aspect of things is so much better.
Nice. I mean, that is a huge improvement.
Yeah, there's so many examples like that have gone on for me in the past, 6 months, that just make things like enjoyable and a lot less stressful. And I'm so appreciative of that.
So part of the reason we're recording this is because I've opened up my practice to take on new clients. So what would you say to someone who is struggling with what you're dealing with? Like, what advice would you have for them? And I'm not asking you to sort of give me gushing praise or tell everyone they have to work with me. It could be work with some other practitioner. But I guess just what would you say to someone who is unsure about taking that next step?
I kind of like mulled this question over in my head for a long time because I just don't want to give any advice to people that's going to make them feel like, I'll never feel like that, or what a bunch of crap, or whatever like that. But I guess the one thing I would say is that if you feel like you need help or you're experiencing any of this stuff, just like reach out to somebody to get help, and like make sure that you feel 100% comfortable with that person. If you don't like what they're telling you, or you don't have like your full faith and trust in them, just move on, because it's just kind of like a waste of time. And that's really all I really want to say is just get help, because you can't do it on your own. And it's really worth it when you find somebody that could help you.
Well, Jill, thank you so much for joining me and for opening up and sharing your story. I know this isn't always the easiest stuff to talk about, but you were, really honest about the process and what you've gone through and where you're at now.
Oh, well, thanks for having me, Chris. And thank you for everything, really.
So this is the second interview, and it's with a past client called Kerry, and we've recently finished up working together. We worked together for 5 months. As part of Kerry's story, she talks about our work having 3 stages. So the first was focusing on food and sleep and routine. The second was on body image. And then the third was specifically looking at a thyroid condition. And I just want to mention that I don't always do things in this order. But for Kerry, the structure piece was really crucial. And this is why we started where we did. And when talking about her thyroid issue, so the third part of this, Kerry makes reference to Hashimoto's. And for anyone unfamiliar with that term, it's a type of thyroid condition that is autoimmune in nature. So the body's immune system is attacking its own cells. And in the case of Hashimoto's, it's the cells in the thyroid gland. She mentions about playing around with her diet here, so looking at things like gluten, etc. We were only able to do this at the point that we did because Kerry had worked on her food issues. So she was in touch with her body. She could tune into her subjective experience to notice how things changed when she had certain foods or when she avoided certain foods. So while a lot of what I was working on with Kerry in the beginning was through the lens of improving her relationship with food, towards the end, it was then more appropriate and more doable for us to then focus on the nutritional side of things. So I just wanted to make that known and explain why we did the things that we did, but definitely we couldn't have done that final piece around the thyroid at the beginning because of where Kerry was at. So with that preamble out of the way, here is Kerry telling her story. Hey Kerry, thank you for joining me on the show today.
It's a pleasure.
So I guess to start with, do you want to explain a little about your background and why you first got in contact with me?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been an on and off dieter probably most of my life, since when I was a teenager, really. And then I had my babies when I was in my 30s. And when my youngest was probably 2 or 3, I decided that I'd put a lot of baby weight on and I needed to do something about it. So I joined Weight Watchers. And I started to lose a bit of weight, and then I started to get into exercise. So I got quite into sort of boot camp and circuits, and then that progressed into weight training, and then that progressed into a bit of triathlon training. and I started to become quite obsessed by it.
Sure.
My whole life was just dominated by exercise, when I was going to exercise, what I was going to eat, had it got the right amount of macros in there, and that was all I thought about 24 hours a day. I kind of shied away from other stuff, so I wouldn't want to go on holiday because I'd miss some sessions at the gym, and wouldn't want to go out for a meal because I didn't know what I was going to eat off the menu. If I did go out, I'd be checking the menu before I went, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that continued for probably about 2-3 years, quite intensely. And then a couple of years ago, I started to feel quite unwell. I was struggling massively to do any exercise because it was wiping me out. It was a time when I had a lot going on at work as well, so I was struggling with work and stress as well at the same time. And then I'd go through these periods of just absolute fatigue where I couldn't do anything for a good week or so, just barely get out of bed really. And then all this time I was still trying to exercise crazily, trying to control what I was eating. I was gaining weight, went to the doctors who said I was stressed, bordering on depressed. And that was about the amount of their advice that they could give me.
Okay.
And then after that, I tried a few things. I had a referral from the doctors for CBT, but that really didn't work for me at all. I found the therapist only wanted to talk about one thing and couldn't see the bigger picture. I tried some counselling, tried a few online programs, but again, they weren't really for me. So I got stuck in this kind of obsessing about food and exercise, even though I was gaining weight and wasn't enjoying the exercise anymore and didn't want to diet anymore. I got stuck. And there was lots of sort of binge eating and stuff like that going on. But then I was still forcing myself to go to the gym and do all this exercise regime that I didn't want to do because I thought I couldn't put on any more weight. So then I've always been listening to podcasts, but they've always been the, hitting your macros, protein, exercise type based ones. So then I started to look a bit further afield into other areas.
Yeah.
And more sort of body positivity, stepping away from diet type podcasts. And I came across a podcast that you were interviewed on by Rachel Foy.
Yep.
And I was really interested in what you had to say. So I then went on to listen to a few more of your podcasts. And I was really keen on your philosophy and the way you looked at things. So I signed up to go on your waiting list for your programme. As it happened, I think I signed up probably the day that you actually opened it. So we had an initial chat, and I felt that we were a good fit for each other. So I signed up to work with you for 6 months.
So you mentioned about CBT, you mentioned about counsellors. Was there anyone else that you worked with in a one-on-one capacity that was offering a similar thing to what I was offering?
Yeah, I worked, I've forgotten her name. I worked with a lady whose name I can't remember. What's her name? Can't think what her name is. Oh, blimey.
It's okay. Maybe it's better that we don't say her name.
Yeah. No, she was really quite good.
Okay.
So anyway, I worked with a lady from a health and fitness background that was kind of also had kind of been through the journey herself, and was now working with clients on helping them step away from this kind of diet and exercise mentality. And that was quite good, but I think looking back in hindsight, I didn't work with her for long enough.
Okay.
So what had happened is I'd signed up to her online program, and there wasn't many people signed up, so she offered me a couple of one-to-one sessions instead of the online course. So I think in the end we probably had 3 or 4 sessions, but looking back, I think I probably should have maybe stuck with it a bit longer. It wasn't long enough to change things. It certainly started to help to break some of the things down around the obsessive eating and stuff like that. But yeah, it wasn't long enough in hindsight.
Okay. And was it a big decision to get in contact with me? Was there hesitancy with that?
I think there's always hesitancy, isn't there? Because I think you get stuck in this battle in your head with what on earth's wrong with me? Why am I always thinking about food and exercise? Why am I gaining this weight? What's up with me? What's wrong with me? Why wasn't anybody taking me seriously?
Yeah.
And then, so then it you think, is it just me? Is this all in my head, or is there actually somebody there that can actually help me? So I think for me, it probably got bad enough that I thought, okay, enough's enough. I need to do something about this now. Sure.
So can you then describe the process of us working together and what that looked like for you?
So we had Skype consultations for about an hour every few weeks. And then between those consultations, you'd set me some kind of homework, which was to do an exercise or listen to a podcast or read some bit of a book or watch a YouTube video or something like that. So to start with, we mainly looked at sort of routine, so food, sleep, hunger, energy, that type of stuff, and we tracked those initially through your tummy app.
Yep.
But I was a bit of a rebel and I didn't like it because it reminded me too much of MyFitnessPal and tracking stuff through there. Not that it was counting calories or telling me macros or any of those things, because we turned all of those off. But I just found it quite a struggle to go back to constantly putting stuff in an app. So we resorted to pen and paper for me in the end, which worked for me. So then through looking at those food diaries and things, we started to make some changes to the way I was eating, looked for little patterns, looked if I was getting enough sleep, that kind of thing. One of the big things we did with me is put snacks and things in and looked at why I was writing in the diary that I was hungry, but wasn't actually eating until sort of 2-3 hours later. Yeah. So we did a lot of work around snacks and always having snacks with me. And I was horrified to start with, saying I'll eat them if I've got them. I can't do that. I can't have a whole selection sat in my drawer at work, so I'll eat them. But I soon realised that I didn't eat them. I was only eating them when I was actually hungry. Yeah. So those were the kind of first steps. Then we kind of moved on to body image and did various exercises and various things to listen to and stuff. One of the big things was this blueprint exercise that we went through, which was around looking at writing a blueprint for somebody on how to have food and body issues, and then kind of writing the opposite blueprint for somebody with a healthy relationship with food and body image. Now, I wrote pages for the first one, and I think I submitted pretty much a blank piece of paper to start with for the second one, because I was majorly struggling, had not a clue what to put on the piece of paper. But I think over a few weeks we went through some of the issues, and that blueprint slowly started to fill with ideas about this healthy relationship with food and body image. And then kind of the third phase we moved into was around the thyroid, that I had some testing done through the doctors that suggested I had a high TSH and kind of a borderline low T4. And then you suggested that I got some private testing done, which came back suggesting that I'd got Hashimoto's. So from that we then looked around diets and supplements and stuff like that that could potentially help with Hashimoto's, and had a little play around with taking things like gluten and caffeine and alcohol out the diet to see if that made any difference, really. So that was kind of the process that we went through, I'd say.
Yeah. And just you mentioned about the app, and I just want to flag this for people. Whenever I'm working with someone, I do like to get them to track things, but I'm also very aware of I don't want that to create more problems than it's solving. And so you are definitely not the only person who I'll then find some other way. So not using Tummy, we use pen and paper, someone keeps notes in their phone, whatever they can do there, we get the benefit, but without causing the anxiety. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that. So I guess then with everything you covered there, what are the health improvements that you've noticed since us working together? So where you're at now?
I think the big thing is that I'm so much happier. I'm so much more confident, so much more relaxed, less stressed. Generally, I feel much better. I'm not obsessing about food or exercise anymore. I'm relaxed around food. I'm eating food that makes me feel better. I'm not binging. I think some of the sort of feeling tired all the time, the uncomfortable stomach, stuff like that, those kind of symptoms have subsided.
And then obviously the body image piece that you mentioned, where are you now with this stuff? And you don't have to say that everything's amazing and every day you look in the mirror and you think you're a model or anything along those lines, but just like where is that stuff now?
So, I mean, to start with, I was really, really uncomfortable with how I looked. We had many a conversation where I didn't want to go to weddings, didn't want to do things because I was worried about what people would think about me because I'd put on all this weight since the last time they saw me. And then I think through the exercises, things started to change and I didn't really notice them changing. And then we got so far down the line and I said to you I'd signed up to this Couch to 5K course. And you said, oh, well, how do you feel about the body image or something along those lines? And I was kind of a bit flabbergasted. And I thought, you know what, I haven't even thought about the fact that my body image would have any effect on me doing this course at all. Whereas at the start, there's not a chance I would have ever signed up to that course. So I think, yeah, just generally, I'm more confident. My weight and my body image don't hold me back anymore. I wouldn't say that I was, completely comfortable and, want to be the size that I am, but I think I'm accepting of it now and it doesn't stop me doing anything. And there's so much more to life than what stress size you wear or what the scales say. I think is the big thing that I've come to learn.
Yeah, and I would say it's this kind of stuff is a work in progress. We worked together for 6 months and I don't expect everything to be changed in that time, but you now have the tools to then continue to deal with that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
So finally, what would you say to someone who is struggling with what you were dealing with? Like, what advice would you have? So someone doesn't know what the next step should be. What would you say to them?
I think you need to start, I guess, thinking outside the box a bit. Because for so long, I just thought that more exercise or a different type of exercise or a different diet or different way of eating or going paleo or wherever it may be was the answer to all my problems, and it wasn't until I kind of broadened this little world that I was in that I started to realize that actually that there might be another way. Certainly don't be afraid to seek help. It can be a struggle. I went through several things before I found the right person. But, asking for help doesn't mean that you failed in any way at all. There's nothing to be ashamed of that you need a coach or, you need to go to some counselling or whatever it may be. Do your research with whatever you're signing up to or who you're going to work with. I think sometimes you can be... when you finally decide to commit to working with somebody, you can be that desperate that it's like, oh, yeah, they know something about dieting or they know something about whatever. And, yeah, perhaps they can help me. But do your research. read up about the person. I'm sure they've got blogs or podcasts or, other customer feedback and that such like, see if they seem to fit with your problems. The other thing I'd say is that it is a financial commitment. There's no denying it. I think it will seem a big thing at the time, but if you finish the programme and feel so much better, it will be well and truly money worth spent.
All right, Kerry, well, look, thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing your story and what you went through. I know the listeners are really going to benefit from this, and it was wonderful working with you.
Thanks, Chris. A pleasure.
So that is it. Thank you again for listening to the show. As I mentioned at the beginning, I am taking on new clients at the moment. If you want to find out more, simply head over to www.7-health.com/help, so HELP, for more information and to apply for that initial chat to see if we are a good fit. Next week, I'll be releasing another past episode, and then the week after, I will be back with a new one. So I'll catch you then.
Thanks for listening to Real Health Radio. If you are interested in more details, you can find them at the 7 Health website. That's www.7-health.com.